Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. Hilchoi Schida is the laws of rentals, Prakim Dalid, Hey, and Vav, and we are beginning with Pedig Dalid. Pedig Dalid is going to be about what were to happen if there was a change of the agreement that was made between the one who rented it out, the owner, and the renter. When will that change? When will that change be Machayev the Soicher, and when will it not? Halacha Aleph, Pedig Revi has 8 halachas, beginning with Halacha Aleph. It says that Rambam if a person rented out a donkey and he told the owner that he's taking the donkey to lead it through the mountains. Have to understand that the mountain area is more slippery than the valley area. He made a change. He brought it into the beak. He brought it into the valley. Actually, by doing so, he diminished the chances that this animal would slip. And therefore, even if it does slip, then Potter, he will be exempt. Even though he made a change, but he made a change to a place where there is less chance for it to slip. The owner knew he's taking it to the mountain. He took it to the valley. Even though Ataka slipped, he's going to be Potter. However, if the animal, so to say, overheated, and that's where the valley is hotter than the mountain area, then he's going to be chayiv. In other words, we can say that since he made the change, that's why the animal died. Similarly, the opposite case, and he brought it on the mountain. So here he brought it to a place that's more slippery. Right, because it's more likely to slip. Takola means a takola of sleeping in the mountain more than in the valley. But if it overheated here, the opposite patur. Because the heat in the valley is much more than the heat on the mountain. Because of the wind that blows dafka in the head of in the mountains. However, if you brought it up to the mountain, it's taka less stuffy. But sometimes the animal heated up dafka because of the climb. Your change made it overheat. In other words, the change in itself is not machayev you. It's what that change had to do with the way the animal died or with the way the animal got diminished in value. If your change made it worse, then you're chayev. You rented a cow in order for the cow to do charisha in the mountain. Now, guys, the mountain is assumed to be rockier, and therefore an area and where it is more difficult to plow, right, the mountain than in the bikam. And in other words, you brought it to a place where there's less chance for things to go wrong. And yet, right, the cylinder of the plow broke nevertheless. Here again, Taka, you made a shiroi, but for the better. How? 1 second. Now, the din balapara im ha'umanim shecharshu. It's as the soicher your potter. But if you were not the one that was actually standing and guiding the plow, then they broke it. That's another din of mazik. I'm mazik, and I could have done it in a way where I would not have been a mazik, but that's on the ones who did the plowing. The chein him loishinal das bailum stam. And the nishbarakanka, the soicher is havadi going to be potter, right? Soicher is only chayiv by this is called an oines, but he didn't change anything. But the din balapara im homan, and you made a change and you brought it to a place that it is rockier v'charish bahar, and now the nishbarakanka. Now we say the soicher is chayiv. Now it's important to know, Dovi, the soicher is chayiv, but just like before we said that the ones who did the plowing will have to pay to the balapara. The ones who did the plowing will have to pay to the renter. But the balabas doesn't have to deal with them. The dinner shol secherim omarim, the finish. Halacha base. Umahu din ho umanim sheshavru be'es acharisha. So let's get off a little bit about the dalat shoymnim. In other words, you were hired to plow. A person hired a day laborer. They were negligent, so to say, in the way they did it, and the kalim broke. So what's the din? The din is they have to pay. Now the question is, Plowing used to be done with two workers. One is leading the animal and one is holding the plow. So from these two, who was the one that was negligent? The one that was holding the plow. Another thing. When do we say only that one is chayev if you were plowing on one level? But if you had a field that was planed on different levels, now we say shneim chayavim edmei akankon. They both are chayev to pay. Both the manik oisa bamalame, the one that was holding the guiding pole, the one that was leading the animal, and the one that was holding on to the keli, because it has different levels, they're both equally mechuyev to take the precautions that if they would have taken, the keli would not have broken. So they're both chayev. Halachigim. Is beans, and then he actually threshed on grain, and the animal slipped. Evidently, beans are slippier than grain. Potter. And the opposite, betfu avadosh bekitni is chayiv. Here you go. Shakitni is mechalekes. The kidneys themselves, they cause for the animal to slip. And the guy, the owner, told the renter, don't go to the Pekoit ravine. Why? And he told him why. Because there's a lot of water there. The animal might drown. Go because there generally there's no water. Comes along the renter and he did not abide by that instruction and he did go b'derech nahar Pekoit. And then because of that, clear, it was a direct link. The Chamar died. However, we would not have known of this shinoi without him admitting. Now you have l'chayr amigo, right? But then he adds, I went where you told me not to go. I want you to know that there was no water. Why did he die? Even a shoyel is spotted. I did what I said I'm going to do. The animal died. That's a pure exemption. Nevertheless, say the Chachamim, witnesses are not testifying regarding what happened at that moment. But there are witnesses that say that in that derech, there's a lot of water that kills donkeys, kills animals. You're chayiv to pay. You have chidish. You have a migu. That's called a migu b'mokamed. Sharei shin al das bailim, and he was maida that he was mashan al das bailim. Elama, he's claiming that there was no water, so believe him. No. Even though there was no Edom that there was water then, there's Edom that Pachlal there's water. Nevertheless, that's called a Mikam Makam Edom. So we don't believe the Mikam. He was Maida that he went against the desire of the owner in a place where Halacha says there was water. So okay, so your Shinoi brought about to that. Halacha Dal. I have a version, but I'm going to read what it says. Litrin shal chitin. Notice you specify the weight, and you brought 200. I have it to the tolam, but it's b'chol litrin of so'irim. You're going to say it's exactly the same weight. Yes and no. It weighs 200 liter, whatever that weight is. But so'irim is bulkier. So'irim, they take up more space. Think about it, guys. When you're schlepping something, you're schlepping 10 pounds. But if it's a 10-pound that's small, compact, versus a 10-pound that's very bulky, there was another added headache because of the bulkiness. Umeisa chayiv, because shehanepach, additional volume, kasher lamasoi, and the so'idim have more nepach than chitim. And what did you have? And you brought exactly the weight that you agreed upon, but you brought it from straw. It's even bulkier. Well, it's lighter, but it's takes up a lot more space. You'll be chayiv. The opposite direction. That's the whole theme of this chapter. And the animal died, then you're potter. In other words, Mesa, when you rent an animal and do what you said you will do, you'll be exempt. But if you made a shinoi, you won't be chayiv if your shinoi diminished the chances for the animal to die. If it added, then you're chayiv. And it's not about the weight. It's not about the weight. It's that a woman does not know how to control the animal as a man does, and that makes it harder for the animal needs to be controlled. The then yeah, Yaakov Allah Ish. That was the agreement. Then we don't differentiate between one woman and the other. You can have a woman, whether she's a katana, whether she's a gedolah, one has more experience riding a chamor, one knows how to control it better, even if she's pregnant, which means there's some additional weight or balance. Even if she's menika, it means that she's riding it while she's holding a child. All of that is understood when a man says, I'm hiring this animal to ride a woman on it. Halacha ba. So now we're not talking about volume, we're talking about the weight itself. So we made up for the weight. And the guy added to the weight. So here's the rule. If he added the 30th, and now the animal died, we say chayev because we claim that it is because of this additional weight that the animal died. You're potter. However, nevertheless, because the way it worked then, today we have machines. Machines are different. You're going to spend more money for gas. By an animal, the amount of money of rent that you would pay would be according to how much weight will the animal carry. So you don't get away with the dinner de mamayna. But if the animal died, that's what Chazal estimated. Less than a 30, it will not affect. Shachar stam, without specifying the weight. Then there are standards. And here again, based on the common standard of that time for this type of animal, for example, the Darka, he wants to make it clear what 30 is. 30 means now with additional weight, it's 31. So for example, 30 kilos, and you put 31 kilos, it's not about of what. You'll be chayav. And now we're going to a boat. I just want to mention now for the boat, and I want to mention also for the next Pedic, when we learn about a boat, that it was common that when you rented a boat, you would rent the Baal HaBoat to be the captain of the boat. That's not negated here, but just an intro for the next chapter. It also has to do with, did you say how much weight will you be putting onto the boat? And if you made that clear, and you added the 30th, and the boat sunk, you'll be chayav. The loss that you caused to the boat, you have to pay to the Baal HaSfina. Halacha Zayin. So there's a donkey, and there's a boat, and now a porter. Now, a porter might be different. Why might a porter be different? Because if you know that you're good to carry, again, let's go to my 30 kilos. You can say that people have das. If I would put on you 31 kilos, ask people that do exercise with weights, you understand, they're not looking at a weight, they'll lift it, they'll know, oh, this is a bit too much. And Bachlal, the rule is that if you knew that you're taking too much and you still went through with it, at least you're partially liable. We're not going to say it by a porter. Hakatov, shehoisev al masoi kav echad. And I want you to know the Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf Nun Amud says that the average person carries 30 kav. That's why he's saying the same rule of the 30. You added more than the norm without telling him, and this porter got injured. His back got his disc slipped. God forbid. There, the guy that added this chayav ben azak, and there is a chiddush. And therefore, you might have argued and he should have not taken it. You took it. You know what you're getting into. We don't say that because what do we say? That Yala Liboy, he felt it's too heavy. Nervous then. He thinks it feels heavier. Today I didn't have my breakfast well. I'm ill. That's what he thinks. But since it's only because of my illness, I can push through it. The emes is, no, it's not your illness. That they added more than your body is used to, and therefore, the one who added the weight will be chayav. And the final halach of this chapter, that's all you made up. And as we mentioned, even though that there was a minhag of how much weight, when you say a person to ride, so a man or a woman, okay, then you can do what you said you're going to do. Automatically, there are other things that are included. You can automatically put also on this chamoy your garments. Legina means your flask of water or wine or both. Of the entire trip. The Baal HaChamoy, can tell the renter, no, the whole trip, come on. You're not, you stop, you sleep at night. Why don't you go whenever you stop and buy the food for the next day in that location? That's not a valid argument. And to buy mezainis. He might have to stop every night to go to sleep. Not might, he'll have to stop to go to sleep. But that's the way of the world. When you travel, you want to know that mezainis you have until the end of the trip. Yasser al-zem. But if he wants to add anything and they did not specify, all he said is, I'm renting your chamor for me to ride on it. If he can prevent him from putting on it. And you should know that the Baal HaChamoid himself can also put things on the donkey while you're renting it. We're speaking about the donkey's food, but the Baal HaChamoid can only put on it the food needed for the donkey for one day. Yasser al-zeh, if he wants to add, I don't want to have to trouble myself. No, that we don't say. Here, evidently, also the Baal HaChamoid is going along. Because here we do say the negeh, the Baal HaChamoid, the pneisha efshel liknas b'chol molin u'molin. Now, what's the difference? I get the difference. I think that we're speaking about a guy whose business is it to rent out his donkey and to go along. If that's like today say it's called a trucker. The truckers know exactly when to get tzacha'etzah. They know the derech, they know where to stop, they know where to get cheap food, they know where to get expensive food. If I'm one time renting the truck or renting the trucker, I'm new to this. I would rather go with the food for the whole way. The guy that does it for a living, he's fine with only getting food for one day. Here we're speaking about food for his donkey. But that's all because he has the option of getting it every night. But matzoi doesn't mean you for sure won't have, but it is a shortage. Then yes, Maziach Oleha, the owner puts on the donkey to make sure that they are also covered for the trip. Here also the Baal HaDonkey is going along. And B'chol Elo HaDvarim says that Rambam is B'soicher Stam in a place where there isn't a minhag yadua. Aval b'makom sheyesh minhag hakoy lefi haminhag. And if you change the minhag, what we learned in this chapter is that if your change make things better for the animal, then you'll be pater. We don't say you're a meshana, you're chayiv. If your change made things worse, then we say you will always be chayiv if the animal died or if the animal got devalued because it got damaged. Chavra Perek Chamishi is now going to move around the achrayas that both the owner and the renter has if something happened in the middle of the way. And today you rented a car and you're going from here, you're driving to the Rebbe, in the middle of America, the car broke down. And it just to know, it's clear, das balabatim hepach das toira. There's certain, you saw this, like in America, in today's society, and the Rambam just says, hakal k'minhag hamadinik, you follow the minhag. Today, they say time is money. We will see that in halacha, on one hand, we value time, the Torah values time more than ever. We really value time. The first mitzvah was about making a calendar, not to waste time. But we will see that there's a certain amount of, if I am planning to go on a trip and there's a breakage, remember learning this as a kid, it took me a long time to accept that this is the way to think, to rewire. Even if it means that there's going to be more tircha, and therefore I will have to spend more time doing whatever I set out to do, it doesn't automatically mean that the owner is going to have to deduct the value. We don't say that. Amazing. Okay, Perek Chamishi has 8 halachas. This is today's big chapter, beginning with halacha aleph. So let's begin. This is very relevant because mamash, everything you're learning here can go to a car, but there was animals, and the animal got sick, or the animal nishtatos. Now, an animal becoming mad, just to make it clear, it means that these are animals that they still could perform certain tasks, but it demands more effort on the donkey leader, which is now the renter, and it's going to, even with the extra effort, it's going to take him more time. Shayich, but he has to invest more. Oi, now there's 3 cases, and they're not similar. We're going to have to verbalize like different. The first 2 are similar. The animal is functional, but not so functional. He got sick. He can't go 5 miles an hour. He can only walk 4 miles an hour. Or the king had the right. The shluchim of the king had the right to confiscate. It's called eminent domain when it comes to real estate here in America. But there it was also regarding metaltalin. They can seize your things. Now the key is that even if the shluchim of the melech took it, we're taking it for a day. And again, appreciate the fact that even though you will lose time in your trip, that in itself is not mechayev the owner to compensate. Even if they took it and they don't plan to give it back. Nevertheless, here's the rule. If while you, the renter, was traveling to your destination, the Ashluchi HaMelech took it, even though they're not going to give it back to you. You know what we say over here? They were not after the mosque. They were not after the owner. It wasn't that the owner owed taxes and they chopped his animal. They needed animals for the king right now. They stood on the roads and they took whoever came first. So there's the logic here is that it's your bad fortune. We're not saying that the soicher has to compensate the masked. He did not take away his animal. It's very important. The masked, you won't have to compensate. The government took it. But for the soicher to say, woo, I rented the donkey to schlep my things from A to point B, and I was unable to do so. The masker says, that was not because of me. You were unable to do so because the Ashluchi HaMelech took it. You know, to the point. Listen to the point, guys. That means that the renter has to pay all of the money that he agreed to pay. Even though, you think about this. I remember learning this in the Mishnah. Even though you can say, that's what I used to think. What are you talking about? You're not giving me. The masker says, I gave you. Let's go separate it. The first two cases, I gave you. You thought that the donkey that you took, it would take 2 days. Now that it became a Bissel Meshuggah, it take 3 days and more effort. So what? It's your bad mazel. I fulfilled my side of the deal. When do we say it? Now, this is going back only to the first two cases. You have to see the whole thing will be like this. By the Lavaydas HaMelech, it makes no difference. But when we're speaking about the animal became chalsa, or the animal was nishtatos, as long as the item that it's carrying is such that even if it's thrown to the ground, nothing will break. So what's the problem? The animal is mad. It's acting meshuggah. Every now and then, the pekelach will fall down. That's why it's taking more time. You have to put it back up. It means more time and more effort, but nothing will break. But if the goal was, I'm renting this animal for me to ride, or I wanted, the example is glass utensils. Glass utensils, if they fall down, it's gonna break. Now, what I rented, you're not providing at all in the first two cases. That's not la'avodas hamelech. That's chalsa nishtatos. The masked has to give a new donkey. And what happens to im loyhamid? So the din is yachzir haschar. Here we're speaking about a case that the renter paid all of the money up front. So what happens is, no, the money has to be given. What you got, give back. The masked gives back to the soicher, but the soicher has to pay something. In other words, he did receive some benefit. If the animal became mad in middle of the derech, you know what the soicher is not getting compensated for, which today they would argue, he has a new headache. In other words, it's not just about, what do you mean you brought me halfway? The guy can argue, so what if I'm halfway? Now I have to go about here, I have to get the money back, and I have to find new people. That's life. Nishtatva sodecha. It's like you had bad mazel. Not every time things don't work out and you have to spend more time and effort. Doesn't mean that someone else is responsible. It means that Hashem did it to you.
Return policy.
Now, if you have return policies, one thing is clear: if the agreement was clearly otherwise, or if there's a minig known, then we follow the minig. That Rambam already wrote that in the previous chapter. But it's important to know the way the Torah looks at the achrayus between the masked and the soicher, how we view a person's effort, how do we view setbacks. It's gewaldig. Here we always blame someone, which is a terrible culture. Halacha beis. Meisa behema. Animal died or a bone broke. You have to understand something, guys. The animal cannot do anything. So here it depends on the following. Im amarloi, guys, is the owner to the renter. If lachatchila, the owner told the renter, chamoir stam ani masker loch, ani masker locha. Chamoir stam means that the masker has to now replace the donkey. Chayiv lahamad lechamoir achar mikol makim, which is great. Now, To say Harei shel chala fanecha, we can't say that. Harei shel chala fanecha is the animal is completely out of shimush. Interestingly, when the king takes it, Harei shel chala fanecha. What's that? Think about it. But here we say no, it's not functional at all. Now it's really going to get interesting. So before we said in halacha aleph, the masker, the sheicher gets the money back, but he has to bother himself to get another animal. No, not over here, because over there at least the animal was there. He can't carry the glass. Here I paid for your donkey, stama donkey, not for this donkey, to go from here to there. You have to give me that donkey. Now you, the owner, is not there. They didn't have technology. So what happens? I can take this animal and sell it, not for me, the animal, and I buy another animal to get to my destination, even if the new animal that I'm buying is worth less because the animal that I'm selling is broken. Now, ideally, you don't want him to use the money just for rent because that's mamish wasted money. You want him to buy another animal. If you cannot buy another animal, the sheicher is even allowed to use all of the money if needed. He should not be a hefkeri ingel. To rent another animal. Ideally buy it, because that would mean that if this sheicher is going to use the money of the carcass or of the broken animal just for the rent, that means the owner is getting back nothing or barely nothing. He's allowed to do that. But all of that is because he rented a chamoir stam. However, but if the owner told the sheicher in the beginning, this is important. If you are in the business of renting donkeys, always use this expression. It's going to be beneficial to the owner. Then, like we learned in halacha aleph, which means that now that the animal had a broken bone, or if it died, there's nothing you can do. If you can sell the carcass to buy, not to rent, to buy, then you're allowed to do it. The only money that is left is only enough to rent. You can even rent it. If not, you don't have money, not for this and not for that. The renter must pay the owner. Here again, this is similar to halacha aleph. You only have a taina on him. In other words, the renter cannot press any other financial claims against him. We already have this concept. Only thing is he can complain. But let's go back. If he rented chamoir zeh, not to ride, not for klei zechuchis, to carry tekoach, hoyel v'amar lechamoir zeh, that's where this will be different than halacha aleph. Umeis b'chatzi aderech, ein chayav lahamud le'acher. It's crazy. The masket has no achrayus. Because when he said zeh, why did he say zeh? He meant to say, as long as this donkey is here. This donkey is not here, I have no more achrayus to you. Now, the sheicher doesn't have to bother himself by selling the nevela. The sheicher doesn't even have to protect the nevela. No, it's both. The sheicher can walk away, but the sheicher cannot sell. He has no rights to sell the nevela. It's amazing. It's amazing. Halacha. Avad, I'm just saying, when you learn Gemara, you have to understand taka, why like this over here, why not like that in halacha aleph. But here are the rules. Halacha. Now we're moving on to a boat, and as we mentioned in the previous chapter, here it becomes very clear that when you rented a boat, even though we learned in the previous chapter, when you rent a donkey, many times the Baal HaChamoyer goes along. When you rented a boat, you don't know how to ride a boat. Which Jew knows how to ride a boat? Eli Bran knows how to. Yeah, the exception. Normally, you need to have a nice goyish captain, someone to drive the boat. So renting a boat means you're hiring the Baal HaSfina. That's normally the way it works. And Ido Cohen, I'm not insulting him. He also knows how to drive a boat. And now the boats are above the Yidden swimming, holding onto his yarmulke dirt in the ocean. So here again, Sfina zu ani maskelocha, I'm renting you this. That's the key. And there's two things: this ship and another thing. And the Soicher says, I'm bringing Yayin Stam. Yayin Stam means that he did not specify which wine, which will make a difference. So it's both this and yayin stam. Not like by the donkey, he gets all of the money back. Why is that? Because when I said this, it's much more than by the donkey. The reason why I said this is because by boats, people are more specific than by donkeys. I know the schayra, I know the water here, and I know that most ships taka will sink. I know that this is the ship that I wanted. If you cannot provide me this ship, replacing it is not good for me. The guy says, your ship sunk. Anyways, the wine cannot be transported. The soicher claims, I never said which wine. Now you see why that makes it. No, I need to get the wine there. If you would bring me back the ship, I would get new wine. It doesn't matter what wine I bring. I'm ready. Mitzidi, I can go through with what I wanted. You, the masker, you cannot at all provide with what I need. We don't say like by the donkey, by another donkey. We don't say that by a boat. So since you completely broke, the masker broke it, so to say, the masker is chayiv. I pay nothing to him. So now that we got Sfina Zu and Yain Stam, now let's play it out from all other formulations. Sfina Stam. He never specified. The masker never said which boat. And furthermore, on top of that, the soicher specified Yain Zem. That's very important because Yain Zem means it's for this wine, not for any wine. And again, the same thing happened was the Baal Sfina is driving the boat and the boat sunk. Here's mamish the opposite. How crazy is that? Because when I said Yayin Zeh, the Baal Sfina is saying, I agreed to get a boat. I'm going to bring a boat. Not this boat. I'll bring another boat. There's no reason for me to do it because Yayin Zeh, your wine is in the bottom of the ocean. But from my part, I'm willing to go through with it. You're the one that's not going through with it. If you're not going through with it, why should I lose? You said Yayin Zeh, bring me that wine. So he has to pay him for all of the money. Now, there's a nuance. Yeah, the soicher has to pay for all of the money, but not exactly. Why not exactly? Because there is also, when let's say the Baal Sfina charged $100. What's $100? Well, let's say it's $90 for the boat, say, and it's $10 for his service. He's not providing half of the service. If he went halfway and it sunk, $5 deduction you should get. Epis. But like because there's something that the Baal Sfina has to deduct, but that's going to be minimal. Now let's go to the following. Oh maloi, if the owner, it's always in these halachas, it's the owner to the renter in the beginning of the agreement. Sfina zu ani maskelach. But here it's both together. It's Sfina zu but yayin zeh. You understand? Each one cannot follow through with their part. And the ship sunk. So here, what do we do? Here it depends who's holding on to the money. Then the masker doesn't have to return it. The masker tells him, no. You bring me your wine, I'll bring back the boat. You're not bringing your yayin zeh. Why should I bring back the boat? But if he didn't give it, because the soicher says, no. You bring me back your ship, I'll bring back the wine. This is all based on the premise that once something sinks to the bottom of the sea, that's it. Now, and the opposite also. Sfina stam, yayin stam. Here, each one is chayiv to follow through. Right? Which means whatever, until what point you got there, whatever the rent was, pay half of the rent. The idea, the logic is beautiful. And what happened was, you decided to unload it the middle of the way. The opposite. You agreed to be masked your ship to me, because I'm giving you a 5-day job. You understand? Let's say every day is $100. After 2 days, I decided, no, I'm good here. I'll sell it here. The masker also can have a timer. The masker says, no. I agreed, not $100 a day. I undertook to do it because I needed the $500. I'm here to serve you for the 5 days. You want to unload, right? You want to be poetic over here? Oh, zum gesund. You have to pay the whole money. What happens if the guy says, listen, I would pay you $500. I get that. I found someone else. I took you for 2.5 days, 250. I found someone else that wants to go from here to that same destination. Now it's not so pasha that we're going to see soon about subleasing, because the Baal Asfina, like we know, sometimes it's not just about the money, especially if it's who he's servicing. So he can have a taina, the Baal Asfina, but the soicher doesn't have to pay. Maskir, el narvas then the yesh la Baal Asfina all of taroimus. We're going to become more and more familiar with this taroimus. He has the right to have a complaint, which is also upsada a yichis. You can stack out. You have a good taina. Sometimes it's enough. You tell a person, you're right. You have a halachically valid taina. The guy says, I don't want my taina. I want money. No, das ist oisle. Geld nicht, aber kannst du aber tainos. It's like Bachram in the yeshiva with good hanola. They never budge for right or wrong. Good, at least they let the bachers the tainas achos. Now, chein, which is great. You already sold it in middle of the way. Now the guy that bought it is not going to eat it. The guy that bought it wants to resell it. In other words, the purchaser himself is changing places with the guy that began. And here again, no, you would think over here that the Balasfina cannot even have complaints. That's a chiddush. Here, you didn't even unload it. Before he unloaded, and a new guy came. Here, the only thing that's changing is the person. No, it's the schayt is still here. Someone else is selling it in the same destination, but he still has the right to have a Torah. This big nation. Yeah. You get used to it. You have to change. Halacha says that Rambam oy bazoi mikan an the oimer shamasker bais lechaver. No, it's halacha dalad we had in Chazal. Now that Rambam is applying it, when you rented out your house, adzman kotzov, we'll see. I think it's going to be in the next chapter a lot. Not I think it's going to be in the next chapter. The huge difference between when you make a rental agreement in real estate, lizman kotzov or stam. I know the halacha here. Here it goes every 30 days. It's like a month to month. We're going to see how the Torah views that. But if it was Lizman Kasu, and just like we said by the boat, Rambam says, I was saying masking. And by the way, here, the owner doesn't even live there. But you know what, halacha, I want to add something to that. That's even if you're living in the house with him. Even if you're living with the house, mamish like by the boat. Because you can have taroimus, you're chayv to pay. If I made up to rent something from you, Atzman, Yodua, if I move out, we'll see next, I have to pay. But I can get someone else to be in my place. But I cannot add more dioidin, which means if my family is of 4, yes, I have the right to sort of say sublease it out, making sure subleasing it, meaning that the new tenant will pay the owner. But that's only if he has the same numbers of his family, but now the Rambam is saying there is a chiddush. We do find explicitly in the Gemara that if I rented an item from you, I'm not allowed to rent out that item to someone else. It's not mine to rent it out. We learned that already before, right? The Seicherish and the Seicherish, you can't do that. But that the Rambam says that's only by metaltalin. Because the owner tells the first Seichet, I don't trust that guy. By karka, you're not stealing the karka. Karka ain't an exelis. When it comes to a boat, like we explained, the way it worked then, and that's only in that case, is that if I had a boat, if I owned a boat, when you rented my boat, I went along. When there's no chashash that it's going to be stolen or I'm there, then there's a taroimus. I did not want to do dealings with you, but I'm still not losing my money. And lama titrach v'taskir beisi la'cherem. Based on that, another detail. Yes, when I rent something, Lisman Katsuf, as we'll see in the next chapter, if I rent something for a house, I cannot break the lease. I can break the lease, I have to pay you. So since I have to pay you, I can tell you I'm paying anyways. I have the right, instead of out of my pocket, I found my chaver that's going to pay on my behalf to the owner. But if the owner says, I don't want that guy, I'm letting you off the hook. I agreed to rent it to you for 12 months. You're moving out after 6 months. Don't pay me the other 6 months. Then he cannot, the soicher doesn't own it. The soicher cannot say no. The trader says I'm chayv to pay, which means it's mine. The Rambam paskins that I can put in another tenant. Timeless. No. If the guy is foregoing the money, then he cannot put someone else in. And that is actually, says the Rambam, the application of the pasuk, al timna toiv mi ba'olav. Don't withhold good from the owner. What is that verse referring to this case? Instead of you renting it out to the other, it's almost like Dina de Bar Metzra. Rent it out to the owner, meaning the owner won't get money, but the owner wants that. Now the Rambam says, that and the Yitan Schori Atzayv Zmanoi. Oh, it's that is a must. The only question is, you can bring someone else in, and if you find no one else in, then you have to pay. If the owner is Michael, then it's yours. If we view it that I rented it, it's mine, then it's mine. No, the Rambam says v'lo yiroi lishes adinamis.
So Rambam says subleasing is okay, and is that the halacha? As long as the same number of people.
The trade halacha, yeah. Subleasing is okay. Kavan, very important. We're going to have more next chapter, God willing, soon. When I rented something for a specific amount of time, and I'm breaching the lease, means I'm moving out. I cannot be there. Then the Rambam says I can sublease if the new tenant is like me in number. The key is the number. My kids are so well behaving, and your kids are chayas. The Rambam doesn't mention anything about that. If it's 4 and 4, 8 and 8, you're good.
In that case, the owner could say, just leave it.
According to the Rambam, yeah. And the others even disagree with that. Depends how you view the relationship of the renter with that real estate. Allah. Bayis, again, as we had before by the Chamoid, big difference between bias, right? If someone owns a lot of real estate, bayis, we'll see. Bayis, ani masker loch. And after the guy signed the lease, after they made the proper kinyan, ba'achash iskir loy nafal, eino chayev livnoisoi. How great is that? Novos, then, let me just explain something. Dovi, if I rented something for a year, we're not saying that if the house fell after 6 months, I have to pay for the year. No. But bayizem means that the owner is saying, as long as I have this house I'm renting to you. There's no shibud on the owner to provide a house for 6 months. This house is meshubah to you for the 12 months, But if this house is not the end, then Gandik, it would have been for you 12 months. You're not paying, but there's no achrayas on the owner. And if the guy paid all up front, but that's because he said bayizet. But if the masker broke it down, they hear it broke. Then chayv bayisachem. Gavaldik. Because you did not have the right to break it. You broke it. Now you got to build it. Im chazer achashes chadilazet. Our owner rented it out to the Uven. Now, by the halacha, if you own something and you rented it for the Uven for 12 months, you have no right to rent it for someone else. We know that. You did something, the owner did something, shalaikidin. How will it even be effective? Yeah, if the other guy, if the Soicher Sheni abides by the Torah, he lost. He was tricked by the owner. But if the guy is someone who, God forbid, is a mafioso, he has a contract and yesh b'koichoy to kick the guy out. Shloikedim. That's what happened. Now the balabais is still meshubet to the soicher rishon. Even though he said bayezeh, because he did something biyadayim that took the soicher out of bayezeh. Biyadayim, he can't move him out. But if the house fell down, that's the chiddush. There's no chiyuv on the owner. However, in contrast, Allah Chazayin, he's kolay bayestam, not bayezeh. And va'achar shenasalei bayis nafal. Now there's much more responsibility. Much more responsibility. Chay livnoisai, the owner has to rebuild it or to give him right away a house that's similar. The bayis achar, not similar. Another house. Another house. What's that? Another house. Dovi means if the new one that he built is small, if the replacement is small, you have to chafis. Compared to the house that fell, here already ein hasoicher yachal la'akev olav. See, it goes both ways. I'll tell you why it goes both ways. Because it was bayistam. But now, 1 second, I want to add a detail. If you rent a bayistam 3-bedroom, he has to give you back a 3-bedroom. You know, it's here we're not. They never specified. That's key. They never specified those details. Fakert. They said bayistam. What's bayis and halacha? We keep on learning it. Bayis is a place where you can lay down. You know how much space you need to lay down? 4 amas. B'chayim 4x4 amas. La'achar 180. I don't know how big a cave it is. 4x1. In other words, it's not that much space. So you said bayistam, he's mechuyev, but he can give you back even a smaller one, as long as it is halachically called a bayis. Faket because he's kalei al bayistam. Avol. Now, the worst case for the owner, the best wording for the renter is bayis kozeh ani maskaloch. If you know the halachas, that's the best case scenario. Because then, first of all, it's not this house, which means that if something happens to this house, the owner has to replace, and the owner has to replace it, taka similar. Chayev lahamad le bayis kimidas orkai umidas rachve shel bayis esheiro ve'enei yachaloy meloi na loyhoye inyan devari elosh yakarav lenor. I meant like this near the nod. Oy la shuka la merchatz. El chayev lahamad le bayis kimidas yochutzeros. And I just when I was learning yesterday, I need clarity for me, which is like this. Is it that also? What, in other words, what about the location? I'm just curious. Does the masker have to give him a bias kimidosai? Look at the details with the shape, with the size, with the shape. Also in the right neighborhood. You want to live there, Chabad Sola. That's what the guy said. So is it that he's mechuyev to give him the location plus the size and the shape, or only the size and the shape? That I don't have clear. What does it mean, kozeh?
It's like only size and shape, you know?
I don't know. In other words, Ella means it's not only that, it's also that. Maybe. I don't know. And therefore what? In the case where the house fell down and now the masker has to rebuild it, you know what kezeh also means? They say when the president of Brazil, Lula, the first time became a president, he came from such a background of poor people that when his wife looked at the palace, she says she's not moving in there because it's too big to clean. She had no idea that when you move into this palace, you have people that are mashamish you. In other words, if a guy rented a small house, the masker cannot build a big house. He says, no, you want to be a minimalist. It's more headache. If it had 1 room, don't give 2 rooms or 2 houses. You don't diminish from it. See, diminishing windows means there'll be less natural light. But don't add to windows. You know why? Adding windows, you have to clean more windows. Adding windows, if they didn't have windows, it was just holes in the wall. Creates too much wind, too cold. It has to be taka kozeh. Elamidash name. And the final halacha in this chapter, halacha ches, masked aliyah stam. You rent out a loft. Here, there's another nuance. The loft has to have something to lay on. Chayev lahamad lo aliyah. Same thing, guys. If the loft falls, same thing. Since you didn't say zeh, so far the same. So the masket is meshuba to build another loft. Or if he already owns one, to continue the rental over there. So what happens is, Now, wait, what we had in halacha vav was, guys, halkot, that if I said bayazeh and it fell, I'm not chayv to build it. Here, it's not so simple. Here, of course, if everything falls, I'm not chayv to rebuild it. But when I said aliyah zu she'al gaba bayazeh, what happens if only the aliyah fell in? In other words, the floor of the aliyah, which is the roof of the bias, broke open. The bias is standing. Here, I have to fix it. Lefikach, because there's the shibut and the bias is here. Lefikach im nifchaso haliyah. Now, how much of a hole in the ceiling floor must there be for this shibut to kick in 4x4 tfachim? Not amas, guys. If there is an opening of 4x4 tfachim or more, since the bias is still standing, chayev hamasker l'sakein. And you know what happens if he doesn't fix it? That's a good sugula. He's going to fix it yesterday. Now, there happens to be another side to that coin. That the Baal Ha'aliyah cannot tell the Baal Abayis, I don't want to live with you. I rented to live with me, not with you. The Baal Abayis says, no. Until I fix it, you live with me. I'm going to fix it in 2 months from now. I don't have money to fix it. It's a two-way sword. Two-edged sword, but it works. Okay. Now, which means you have a 3-story building, a big yichus then. And what happened was he rented out the 3rd story. People want to live closer to the ground, at least then. Truma people, I know in Brazil, everything is in apartment buildings. It's amazing. Real estate, the higher, the more expensive. For a Truma Yid, for Shabbos, for Sukkot, especially if you don't have a porch, you want to live in a lower story. So if you rent it out to the soicher, the 3rd story, and like we said, there's a hole in the floor, 4x4 tfachim or more. So now he was mishabe the house to the aliyah. So the guy can move down. That's good. If I can't, it's to the benefit of the renter. But what happens if you move them to the 2nd story? Now only the 2nd story has an issue. You can move up to the 3rd story, but the guy can say, I don't want to schlep up a story. If the balabayis not wanting to have the snudlik in his home can tell him Yoder, or the guy can say, I only paid because it was the 2nd story. I'm going to go to I'm not going to schlep to the 3rd story. And therefore, lo Yoder, dem don eman si noisoi. Maisa be'echot shem lachavene. Dolizu shal gabi aparsek azani masko. It's very similar here. It's about, I am renting to you this vine, but he specified the vine that's draped over a parsek. Parsek is a peach tree. Remember that? So normally you have trellises, the vine, and now the vine produces grapes. It can lay on the ground, but it's better, right? It's a different time on the grapes. It's easier for you to pick it. So he was mishabe the peach tree to the vine. The guy didn't just rent the vine; he rented the vine as it is on top. This concept of your mishabe, the bias to the aliyah that Rambam is applying to our scenario. What happens if the neck got ill and a parsek the vine is still there? Nevertheless, similar to the case of the aliyah, the bias is meshubed that you, the owner of the peach tree, chayev atol ahamad parsek calls mancha adolas kayemes, because he didn't just rent the vine; he rented the vine draped over the tree. My friends, we are starting today's 3rd chapter, which is Perek Shishi of the laws of Schiras. Now, we're going to learn more about when you have an agreement between a owner and a renter. We're speaking about real estate. We're going to learn a lot about who is responsible for what and what happens when the zman of the rental is over. Does there have to be a certain amount of time prior to which on both parties that they have to notify the other that their time is up, and the big difference between whether something is rented from the outset, Lizman Katsuf, you're renting it for 6 months, for 6 years, versus a rent stam, which goes from month to month here, or however it works, how that will play itself out when either party want to end the rent. We're going to learn phenomenal halachas about what happens if in the middle of the zman of the rent, the real estate prices go up. The real estate prices go down. We're going to see how that affects the money that has to be paid for rent. Perek Shishi has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam. Hamaskir bayis lachaveru bebira gedayla. A person, let's begin with rights that a person has when they rent out one apartment in a huge building. So guys, I know today there are minhagim. I know that today everything is already written in the contract. There was no contracts. Here we want to know, there was no minhag yadua. What is the din Torah? How much rights do you have in the building? So since it's a big building, yes, mishtamish bezizeha, if the building has protrusions that we just learned about not that long ago, people would hang things on these protrusions. You have the rights to the protrusions. You have the rights. Now, there's a big machlokes what this means. One way it is that when you enter your apartment, if you look at the walls, which is in the common area, the 4 amas width of the walls on both sides are meshubit to the owner of this apartment. That's one of the ways of applying it. But again, there's a big discussion exactly what that means. And you automatically, if this apartment building has some sort of a garden, you who rented the apartment, automatically you have a right in, not exclusive, but you have the rights. In the garden, in the courtyard, you have the right if there is a yard behind the building. Normally the yards that people use were in the front. The yards behind, we learned this in Hilchos Shabbos, was normally for storage. But you get that right. You have automatically a right in all of these common areas. If people would use the thickness of the wall because there were cracks in it, people will use it for storage. Gamzem, even though you never specified that. If you rented an apartment in a building, that these are your schusim. Still, the Rambam writes, it's also very important to know the terminology. Because the terminology, like here, will really determine what was included, what's not included. If you have a co-op, if you have a, there's different words that mean different things. Follow all of that. That you follow the minig. Same thing will be over here. Halacha beis. If a person rents out his courtyard, what's not included by halachic default are the barns. Courtyard only means courtyard. Apartment doesn't only mean apartment. Apartment means also the courtyard. It means the garden and the courtyard. It means the yard behind the house. Not a chutz. So now you want to know what is included in a house, what's not included in a house. So you're obligated to provide doors. Can you imagine? Oh, I only rented you the house, but I didn't mean the doors. No, you have to rent out the doors. And that if you have windows that have been damaged, the owner is mechuyev to fix it. You have to strengthen the roof. And if there is a beam that's supporting the roof, who's chayiv? Not the renter, the owner, the maskir, and velasa is neged umanal, a bolt and a lock. That means anything that's needed for security that is placed inside the house has to be provided for by the owner. Any type of work that you have to hire someone to do it. If they're fundamentally necessary, like security, like a beam, if the beam is not going to be fixed, sooner or later the whole thing will collapse, and the owner cannot say, well, then when it collapses, we're going to go back to the previous chapter and see what my chiyuvim are. No, you have to maintain it. Now that Rambam is going on the responsibilities of the renter, of the soichen. Now, the renter is the one that's obligated to build the guardrail. It's taka mitzvah. Let's word it this way. Each one is fighting for the mitzvah. The chiyuv is on the guy living there. Likewise, mezuzah. Mezuzah here means the mitzvah. Who puts up the mezuzah? The renter. If you need to prepare the room to place the mezuzah, nowadays we place the mezuzah outside on. Then they used to make an indentation in. Sometimes you have to hire someone to make a proper opening in the stone in which to put the mezuzah. The renter is the one that's high.
Shouldn't the building have already had the guardrail?
No, if it's a brand new building, or if the guy before did not do the mitzvah. If he wants to add a ladder is not the ikir gadol b'yeshivas habatim. It was another ladder. You want to have another way of going up. Oy marzev. You want to fix some sort of let's say that the roof is flat. You want to make it slanted. You want to make it slanted because you don't want water to gather on the roof. Or lohatiach gago, if you want to plaster the roof. The roof is good. The roof is not leaking. You want to add plaster. That's on the guy that's renting. Again, these are the default halachas. Again, if you're living in a minik hamadina here in America, I'm sure there are certain, everything is already the norm, you follow the norm. But if there's no norm, if a person rented out a loft, and as we learned in the previous chapter, or more. And what did we learn in the previous chapter? Now the owner has to fix. How much does he has to fix? A lot. Chayiv l'sakin, not only the tikra, but the tikra and the ma'aziva shel oleho. That means he has to fix the ceiling of the lower apartment. You understand? Yeah, the ceiling and the plaster on the ceiling is the base to the floor. He has to go that deep. Because and not, oh, I'm just going to put the floor in your apartment. No, you fix that which is underneath it. Next case, next halacha. Manure has value. So the rule is that was the standard. It belongs to the guy that's living there. Now it's a two-way street. It's a double-edged sword. Because if it's yours, then you also are chayiv to take care of it. That means if there's an understanding that it has to be taken out or put in a corner, if it belongs to you, then all of the efforts to make sure it's in the right place is also on you. That we say that the halachic default law is that the manure belongs to the guy that's living there. That's if the manure came from the soichers, from the tenants' animals. So we say, normally, let's say, we don't say it over here. No, if I can't, he's renting it. It's the chatzar of the soicher. But then the default halach is hazevel shel ba'al hachatz. You're renting it? No, not for this. The chatzar still belongs to the owner. And the rule is shechatzer shel adam kain l'shlom midatoi. Even though the batim are schunim b'yad hachedim, not the chatzar. Even though he has the right to use the chutzner, like we said, right to use the chutzner doesn't mean he owns the chutzner. He didn't rent the chutzner. He only rented the house. Halacha vov. Now we're learning this final topic over here. That the time of our understanding is coming to an end. The soichid wants out. The owner wants you out. The biggest question we have to ask first is, was the rental for a specific time or was it stam? So we're beginning over here, the halacha vav, that they made an agreement, there is an end date to the contract. And that's a house, a yard, a bathhouse, a store, doesn't matter. Real estate was rented for a specific amount of time. You know what happens? You have to move out immediately when the time is up. There isn't, I couldn't find another place. I don't have where to go. I have a right of X amount of time. Nada. He compels him. He doesn't even have to wait 1 hour. There is no leeway. However, now another detail. What happens if you don't have in the contract yet on a date, but you have a certain word that indicates something? That's like a date. For example, if a person rents out a house, lilina means to sleep. When I rent something to sleep, it means for one night. That's what that word means. Which also means that it was lachatchila for one night. When the night is over, the renter doesn't get to say, well, we never specified for how long. Let me stay another night. No. If it was for Shabbos, you know what it means? I'm renting this place for Shabbos by Torah. Shabbos means Friday day, Friday night, Shabbos day. It means 2 days and 1 night. Shabbos is 24 hours. But when I rent out something for Shabbos, it's self-understood that I have to get in there Friday day to prepare for Shabbos. L'shvisa ein pachos mishnei yomim. Mishnei yomim is not 48 hours. Mishnei yomim means, like I said, the daytime of Friday, I get to move in there Friday day, Friday night, and Shabbos day. Matzah Shabbos, I'm out. I have to leave. If a person rented a house for Nisuyin, that means for 30 days. That's the celebration time of a marriage. Halacha zayin, hamaskir bayis lachaveiro stam, unlike halacha vav. Now we're speaking about scenarios where they did not stipulate an end time. They did not use an expression which halachically means an end time. It was stam. Now the question is, how much notice must be given from either party prior to moving out? So like this. Now we're speaking about the owner needing to give to the tenant, what's it called? A pink slip. He has to let it, what's it called? A notice. He has to give him always 30 days notice in order for the tenant to find a place and for him not to move onto the street. But 30 days is enough. We'll have more details in a moment. And after 30 days, there is no more leeway that must be given. Of course, guys, if the masked, every case is a case. You are allowed, and we advocate for people to be compassionate, to act like Hasidim. We're speaking about the letter of the law. But that 30 days is enough only during the summer months. During the winter, you can never evict someone. If you rented it, stam. You have to wait until Pesach. From Sukkot until Pesach. Furthermore, says the Rambam, can you imagine? A person rented a house, and he gave him a 30-day notice. If the 30-day notice, Yaron, ends before Sukkot, if the 30-day notice ends on the 14th of Tishrei, then the owner is good. The owner evicts him. The moment the 30 days goes beyond the Chag, I take back the 14th. It's after Sukkot, right? If the 30 days is over on the 23rd of Tishrei, that means that it already entered after the Chag until Pesach. Now there's another detail. You have to give a guy 30-day notice. You already gave a guy 30-day notice. Happens to be halachically that since the 30 days was up one day after Simchas Torah, so the guy has another until Pesach. You have to give him another notice because the first notice was forgotten. It's that much time. You can't say, I already gave you the 30-day notice. 30 days before Pesach. And then you kick him out for Pesach. All of the above, guys, that let's say 30 days is enough. That's only if you are living by Ayoros. Ayoros means a city, but it means a smaller city. If you are in a large city, what's a large city? A large city is a place everyone wants to live in the large city. Not me, not everyone, but many people. People have that nature. They like noise. They like movement. That's the way Gahashem made us. So since there's a greater demand, if it takes more time in Manhattan to find an apartment, 30 days will never be enough. 12 months prior. Now, that we differentiate between smaller towns and larger towns by living locations, by homes, by apartments. What about stores? You see, stores is much different because when people sell, it's norm that people sell on credit. When people sell on credit, not like today. Today, I have access to your information. You are going to come back to this store to pay me. If I'm going to be evicted, if I, the storekeeper, which is renting the locality, if I'm going to be evicted prior to a year, I need a year, then many customers that already bought, that they will come back to pay me. They're not going to find me here. They're not going to pay me. I'm going to have a tremendous money loss. If when you signed a lease, you never specified a time, which you should if you own real estate, if it was stub, you have to give the guy always 12 months. How great. These are good laws to know. Now we're going in the other direction. Just like the owner is chayiv to give to the tenant a certain amount of time prior to which he cannot evict him, the same thing is in the other direction. The tenant cannot tell the guy, well, I'm paying you from month to month, I'm leaving. No, there is a certain amount of time you have to give to the owner for the owner to find another tenant. And you know how much time? Exactly commensurate to what we had before. So if you're leaving early, now living early is very important. We're speaking about chevra people. Here it's the opposite, Yaron. Here we're speaking about a guy that made a contract, I think for a certain amount of time, and he wants to cut it early. That's what we're talking about here. So if you are ba'ayoros, 30 days. If you are in a krach, 12 months. It's interesting. Even though we said before that in cities, large cities, there is a shortage of real estate, we give the guy 12 months. And if you did not give him that time, If you're breaking your contract, that's the case over here. There is a Zman Katzov and you're breaking the contract, you cannot leave. You have to pay him schar. And we learned more details in the previous chapter about that. You really have the right to bring in other people. You could sublease, we learned, as long as the numbers of people moving that you're going to move in are not more than yours, even though the owner can have a complaint against you. I only wanted to lease it to you, not to someone else. Allah. Now we are going, importantly, to a place where there wasn't a fixed time. It's not a fixed time. What's the law in America? I'm assuming, even though it's not a fixed time, it's a month to month, but the prices are fixed. In Jewish law, by default, unless you're living in America, we have to follow the Goyim because everyone knows that. It's amazing. If I'm renting this house from you for a year, and I made up a number, that number will never change. That was a contract. If I'm renting a house and I'm writing in the contract, then I'm paying per month $100. Or here in LA, I'm paying per month $15,000. That's the bidding though. That's how much you pay for a house rent, at least. What happens if the prices go up? You have to pay more money. What happens if the prices go down? You pay less money. And not, you have to give me a 30 days notice. No, I'm not giving you a notice. I'm not moving out. But we didn't have a Zman Kavua. The prices will fluctuate according to the market value. This is amazing. Nevertheless, which means if the price of rentals of the homes went up, he can tell him immediately without giving him the 30 days. Either pay bishava achatimsa, pay the current new expensive price, or get out right away. Again, this is only when there is no end date. If there is an end date, you cannot do that. But if there's no end date, according to the Jewish law, unless the minig is otherwise, as I understand it is here in LA, he can make that claim. And similarly, if it's a contract with no end date, and during the rental, and the guy cannot just move out, he has to give him a notice. Even before the notice is due, if the real estate price dropped, I want to pay the now lower price. I am leaving today. Another halacha, nafal beis hamaskir shoyadar boy. Final halacha, I know that this is for sure not goyish law, which who cares? It's good to have the contrast to appreciate. Guys, you have a house. You have two houses. One you live in, and one you rent it out. What happens if you, the owner, your house collapsed? You know what your right is? You're the landlord. You get rid of the tenant. It's a gavaldik thing. This. You get rid of your tenant right away. Because since you own the home, when you rented it, you had your own home. Now you lost your home. You, the owner, have a right away in all of your property, in that property. Yaron is looking at me. He's thinking. I know it's amazing. It's interesting. Allah. Nafal, listen. Nafal beis hamaskish oyadabai. The din is, in other words, we're speaking about a case where the owner has nowhere else to live. When you, the owner, God willing, will own 10 homes, we're not going to say that. But if you have 2 homes only, the one that you live in, the one that you rented out. The one that you rented it out collapsed. No, I'm sorry, the one that you live in collapsed. He can right away evict the tenant. And he tells him, it doesn't make sense that you're living in my home until you find ways. I normally, to evict you, I have to give you the 30-day notice. But for the 30 days, you need to find a place where to live. And prior to that, you cannot be homeless. And I could be homeless. I have no place where to live. No, you have no greater rights than me. That's the Torah. To know what Hashem thinks. That's the way God thinks. If people agreed otherwise, which might be the law of the land, okay, that was their agreement. People who had a son that was getting married would give their son a home. If the father knew when the son is getting married and he could have notified the tenant, giving him the 30 days, giving him the year, and he didn't, that's already on the owner. You cannot go say my son is getting married. Too late. No, it's you, the owner, you have an achrais to notify the tenant. But what happens, listen, you own a house, you own a second house, you live in your house, you have a second house that you rent out. Your son came home and he says, Tate, meet my colleague, we're getting married next week. Halavai to the right person. No, it's the father didn't have the right, enough time, and a father also has the right to tell the tenant, no, my son has the right in my real estate more than you, the tenant. And he's marrying miyad. Yes, the owner can tell the tenant shalom. Same logic. What the tenant is going to live in the owner's house. Ben Balabayas will have to go and find a place to make a chuppah. No. Final halacha in this chapter, halacha Yudalef. Mocharas abayis. You sell a house, or you give a gift, or the owner passed away. This is all about a house that had in it the tenant. What happens now? The new owner doesn't have more rights than the first owner. If the first owner needed to give him a 30-day notice, just because you sold the house, the other guy doesn't have more, cannot kick him out right away. To the tenant, the 30 days. That's if you're living in a relative small city, or if you're living in a large city, you have to give him a 12 months. Because the tenant, you sold, you cannot sell more than what you have. If the original owner needed to give me that amount of time, when he sold you those rights, not more rights. So you still have to give me the same amount of notice.